Holiness starts at home, which is why our Holy Home wants to help you bring subtle and beautiful faith filled decor into your family's daily life. From tea towels to beautiful pre framed art to tablescapes, there's something for every home, and each collection is inspired by something beautiful and uniquely Catholic. From the Mother Teresa inspired collection based on the clean blue lines of her iconic sari to the Ave Maria collection featuring the stunning Marian monogram. I recently received a few of their dish towels and I absolutely love them. Just hanging them in my kitchen brings a little bit of Catholic meaning and beauty to my everyday life. Every time I see them hanging there, it reminds me to say a little Hail Mary and invite the Blessed Mother's intercession into my day. Order your home in the rhythms of the church at ourholyhome.com. Girlfriends, episode number 446, Using Our Talents to Do God's Work with J.M. Kraemer. Hello and welcome to Girlfriends. I'm Danielle Bean. I'm a wife and a mom, and I'm on a mission to help you know your worth as a woman so you can find peace, balance, and joy in family living. This week we have a special guest who's going to be talking with us about using our talents and Lego to do God's work. Let's get started. Hey, girlfriend, how are you? Welcome to the podcast. Thrilled to be connecting with you here again, as always. This week, I want to remind you, first of all, we've got some Advent content that is coming up over at Girlfriends After Hours. I don't want you to miss it. We're going to be kicking it off with a live event on Wednesday, November 20th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You do have to sign up for that, but it is free for everybody to join. We're going to be talking about some ways to find peace during the Advent season and introducing you to some of the content that we have planned. But to be a part of that, you've got to get signed up over at daniellebean.substack.com. That's Girlfriends After Hours. That's where we go beyond the podcast. That's where we're able to connect and share different kinds of content, different challenges. We had our marriage challenge last month. We had the Change Your Heart challenge back in August. And now we're looking forward to sharing Advent content beginning December 1st, actually beginning November 20th with that live event. But then the daily content is going to start December 1st and go through the 24th. So the first day of Advent this year, it actually works out perfectly for reading the Gospel of Luke, because there are 24 chapters in the Gospel of Luke, and there are 24 days in Advent this year. So we're going to be reading a chapter a day, but we're going to be taking little snippets of each chapter of Luke and just reading and reflecting on them, praying together with them with our daily content over at Girlfriends After Hours. And that content is going to be coming to your inbox every day during Advent. I'm so excited to be able to share this with you because sometimes we can feel overwhelmed at the start of a liturgical season. I don't have a plan for Advent. I don't know what I'm going to do for Advent. This is simple. Get yourself signed up over at Girlfriends After Hours, and this easy, doable content is going to come to you every day. You're going to get access to an audio file that's going to walk you through a guided meditation, Lectio Divina, focused on a passage from each of the chapters of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, throughout the season of Advent, but also sharing some reflection, some discussion questions, some Advent artwork. We're going to be sharing some different things to encourage and inspire you throughout the Advent season, and some prompts toward daily action as well, because I really like for a challenge or daily content to be something that I can apply immediately in my everyday life in a practical way. So we're going to be reading, reflecting, discussing, and praying together, but then I'm going to be giving you something every day that you can take into your daily life in a real way, in a practical way, and apply it in the way that you're living out your faith and family life every day during the Advent season. So I'm really looking forward to sharing this content with you, but you're going to miss out on it if you aren't signed up over at daniellebean.substack.com. You can sign up for free and you get access to a certain amount of content for free. But to get the full experience and to get all access to all of the challenge content that we share at Girlfriends After Hours, to get access to all of our live events that happen at least once a month, and access to our challenges, which are happening on a regular basis over there, you really need to upgrade your membership. So I want to ask you, can you upgrade your membership today? Can you go to daniellebean.substack.com and upgrade to a paid membership, which is just $6 a month, or get a discount if you subscribe for the year? It's $50 for an annual membership. It's a way you can support what we do here at the podcast, but even more importantly than that, it's a way you can give back to yourself. It's an investment that you make in yourself, in your relationships with other women, in your own spiritual life. These are resources that you can get that are practical, that are inspiring and encouraging. And this is the kind of content that you can only get from other Catholic women like you. And that's the kind of community that we are building over at Girlfriends After Hours. People who listen to this podcast are some of the best people on the planet. They are my favorite women. And I love that we get to interact and grow together and pray together through the community that we're building over there at Girlfriends After Hours. So consider this an investment that you make in yourself, but also an investment that you're making in your Advent season this year, because you're going to go deeper in the Gospel of Luke. And I don't know what God's message is for you, but he speaks to us through his scripture. That's why we call it his word. What is God's word going to be to you this Advent season? Maybe we can read together and pray together and put these small action items to work in our lives together and share about the impact that has in our lives. Maybe that's going to inspire you and encourage you to go deeper in your Catholic faith. It's a small investment that really pays off big time. I would be so grateful if you would consider coming over and joining our community, because you are going to make it richer. Your presence there is a gift to us, is a gift to every other person that's a part of the community. So I would love for you to join me over at daniellebean.substack.com. All right, I want to share this conversation that I had. So fun to talk with J.M. Kraemer, because his experience is so encouraging, so inspiring, and so important. He has a message for every one of us. So he has a unique experience, and I'm going to let him share about the work that he does with Legos to do God's work in spite of struggling with a disability. I'm going to let him share with you the story of the things that he's needed to overcome, but some of the most simple ways that he's just said yes to God, said yes to starting where he is. And that's the takeaway that I really pull away from this conversation. I came away just smiling, thinking, start where you are. Do you want to know how God wants to use your talents to do his work? Start where you are. And J.M. Kraemer is such a beautiful example of that. Can't wait to share this conversation with you. Take a listen. I have a special guest joining me here today on Girlfriends. J.M. Kraemer is a Catholic artist based in Saginaw, Michigan. For the last 25 years, he's been building and displaying the annual Lego Church Project, showing that no matter what challenge or disability you face, God can still use your talents. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. I'm fascinated by the work that you do. Welcome, J.M., to Girlfriends. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah. So first of all, let's just get your background. So you've mentioned in your bio that you have a disability. Can you describe that for us? And then we'll get into the Lego project, which I'm super excited about.
I have a mild form of cerebral palsy, which impacts my ability to move around. It impacts how I interact with the world. I've also got a couple of related neurological conditions that impact me as well. A rare condition of the eye is called visual snow, which is a cousin of tinnitus, the ringing in the ears. Okay. So I deal with a lot of issues, quirks here and there, balance issues, you name it. So that's where I'm coming from with the disability aspect, because I live with it. It's not easily seen unless you get to know me, but that's just the way things are.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't stopped you from really being a very creative person and in a unique way. So describe for us, just to get us started here, what exactly is the Lego Church Project?
Every year around late January, February, I take about a month and a half and I build off the top of my head, with no formal training, a massive church built with Legos. Now, by giant, I mean 47 inches long by 25 inches wide, to a height of the tip of the bell tower at 25 inches, complete with a full interior, which everything that you can imagine inside a church, including 300 some odd minifigures. I think I've already lost count.
fascinating. Okay, so you've got these churches that you build with intricate detail. We are definitely going to share some links in the show notes so that people can check this out. How did you get started doing this? You're saying this is an annual project. You've been doing it for so many years now. Tell us about when you first did this.
What happened was when I was growing up, we lived in the original parish rectory for our church, which is St. Helens, now known as Christ the Good Shepherd here in Saginaw. So we
Hmm.
were to take part in activities in the church. My dad was a lecturer. I was doing altar serving, and then eventually started doing choir over there for a bit. So the life of the church was important to us. And Lego was at that time very big.
Yeah.
And my friends were building these elaborate spaceships, and I was not good at it. So I'd start building these rudimentary shapes that eventually turned into churches because that's what I knew. That's what I was involved in. What turned
Hmm.
it from a childhood thing to something a little more profound was I started doing public displays. I did the
Hmm.
first one in Mount Zion Center in Flushing. And then a couple of years later, I ended up doing my first major display at Christ the Good Shepherd, now St. or before it used to be called St. Helens. Started doing that for around the Christmas time. Over the years, it took several years to develop this into this proper ministry where I started getting my mission together, figure out why am I doing this? What's keeping me motivated to
Hmm.
push hard on this?
Right.
And over the years, I've done a lot with this. I will take this to 3 or 4 parishes for people to actually see what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'll give presentations where I'm talking about issues related to faith and disability. In the last several years, I've done a lot more writing because people seem to like my opinion. They seem to think that I have this great element of wisdom on certain issues, and I even had a priest tell me that I'm offering up teachable moments, which I
Oh,
think
that's
is
great.
important. I think that kind of stuff is important in our current age.
Absolutely. I think everyone needs to hear about that and learn more about that. And I think you have a unique perspective given your disability, but the fact that you're still creating these large projects and looking to share your faith in this creative way, that is truly encouraging and inspiring to anybody who it wants to share their faith. I think especially kids though. Can you talk a little bit about sharing your projects with kids? Because we do tend to think of Legos as a kid's toy, but so many adults enjoy them, but kids are just going to have that natural attraction for it. So, what's your interaction been like with kids who've been looking at your projects?
The kids see it as they see the size of it. They walk
Hmm.
into a room and this thing will often dwarf them. They'll be small compared to what they see. They
Right.
will look around, they will look inside the windows, they will see what's going on in there. They will notice quickly, they'll notice the little green army man that's sitting somewhere inside there. They'll see R2D2 hiding somewhere in there. They'll see
Hmm.
the Optimus Prime figure sitting in there. I do that on purpose. I want them to draw their attention inside. But they'll also see the people with the wheelchairs, the service
Yeah.
dogs. I think I've got one kid in there that has a hearing aid this year. I added new to the season. They'll
Hmm.
see the Knights of Columbus dressed up in the color guard. They'll
It's
see the
great.
priests. They'll see they will see the pews, at least on the lower level, completely full.
Hmm.
That plants seeds in their mind as to where things need to be, as to
Hmm.
where they should be, where their parents should be. The adults that take a look at my project, they see some of themselves inside it. They recall memories of the past, the importance of church growing up in their lives. But they also see the other things as well. I think as far as the interaction with the kids, just love it. They're soaking it up like a sponge. They want to learn, how did it get built? Do the figures go in first or do they go in later? Those kind of questions, which I love to answer. I
Hmm.
think at a couple of the displays that I've done, I've actually done question and answer sessions to allow the kids to explore. They get to learn more about what's going on and why is this giant fellow building this. And I love doing it. I love the questions that the kids ask because it makes you think. We don't give kids enough credit for being able to think deeply. And we don't give them enough credit at all, to be honest. And I think that my work allows them to explore their own faith. When they see that this guy's got some challenges and yet this is what he's doing with his life, I've run into situations where I've had a grandparent bring their child who's got cerebral palsy like me,
Hmm.
and they see what I'm doing. They realize that their grandchild may have a future in this world. So
Yeah.
there's always little things like that that always get my attention when I'm out and about and talking with people and sharing that particular season's.
Looking at these giant projects, I'm struck by the patience that it must take to put them together. When you get started, do you have the full idea in your mind, or are you creating as you build it? How does that process work?
What happens is I'm usually studying towards the end of the season. I'm usually studying to see what I like, see what I can do differently. That's just the nature of the designs as they come. What happens is that once I get the base plates laid out, I start to do a lot of praying on where the direction is going to go. I may have ideas in my head, but sometimes things don't always go the way I would like them to. Sometimes the
Hmm.
Lord has different ideas, different directions I should travel in. Put more of a focus on this section than in other areas, which is fine. I'm telling the Lord's story. I'm sharing the Lord's work through my hands, and I am praying through that. Literally
Hmm.
praying with my hands. That's why I call the one newsletter Praying at the Bricks, because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. And so, how long does it take you then? So, you said you do this once a year. You start maybe late January. How long before the project is completed and you're ready to share it?
I would guess about a month and a half, depending.
Okay.
And there are quite a few different factors in that. Sometimes the build can be a little more complex than what I was anticipating, particularly
Hmm.
when I'm trying to design specific things or overcoming design challenges. Season 25 had a couple of unique issues that were different from previous years that I had to figure out. And sometimes that takes time. And then sometimes
Hmm.
if I'm putting an order in for specific parts because I'm running out, parts that are critical to the nature of the build, that can also kind of add delays. I usually prefer to create a buffer of about 2 months start to finish because that gives me a little breathing room. That
Right.
will, it, I can be ready beforehand, but if I've got that 2 month window, I'm not under a lot of pressure because I know based on past experience how long something's going to take.
Hmm.
And there are a couple nerve wracking sections of the build. First, at the halfway point when I'm setting the first strand of lights in, and then the roof phase later on for the second half,
Hmm.
where I'm
Yeah,
adding
I
the rest,
imagine.
adding the rest of the lights, getting the roof tiles in place, setting the massive cross on the roof. That can be nerve
Okay.
wracking.
So every one of your churches has a large cross on the roof?
Yeah, I started doing that several years ago, and then a few years after I started doing it, I decided to create a version of that was a standalone piece that
Okay.
was completely solid, and it weighs a lot, and it can survive a fall off a kitchen table.
Oh, wow. So that's sturdy.
Yeah, I actually had that happen. That's
Oh
how I
gosh.
know. I actually,
Okay. Well, that brings me to another question. When you've completed these projects and you've shared them, do you take them apart? Do you keep them? How does that part
I
work?
what I will do is I will do a dismantling process that will take about 2 to 3 days. There are
Okay.
certain things. There are certain things that will get saved either to be reused or rebuilt for next season. The table, the ambo, the tabernacle, the organ, stuff like that will usually get reserved. And then when the next season starts, I'll make a decision. Do I want to just keep things as is, or do I want to make some subtle change? A
Hmm.
case in point, the tabernacle from between season 24 and the season 25 is slightly different. The organ is completely different because I actually scratch built that from the ground up. I actually didn't reuse the existing organ or modify it. I just went through and just decided I had a couple of seed parts that gave me some ideas, and it worked, surprisingly
Wow.
enough. So
Okay, so these bricks that you're using, are they from kits, or are you buying the bricks wholesale? What are you doing? Because there's so many in here. First of all, tell us how many bricks typically are in a build,
I would
and
say
then
about
where are you sourcing them from?
I
What's
would say
that?
about 80 pounds of Legos in
Oh
there
my gosh.
because you have to figure I've got the walls, the
Yeah.
roof, I've got the interior and the detail work on the interior. I've got a couple thousand one by one rounds of different colors in there.
Wow.
And where I source it from is a couple different places. Sometimes people will get stuff off my Amazon wish list to send it to me. I'll have people that will donate parts, donate their Legos that they're not using anymore. And then sometimes for specific pieces, like the window panes that I use, I will usually get those off of a site called Bricklink, which is a
Okay.
Lego marketplace. And I have a couple different vendors that I will source materials from as needed. And a lot of that's paid through donations that people will contribute. I keep in mind, I don't do this project for money. Any donations that I get is to help cover offset costs,
Hmm.
either transportation costs, food costs if I'm doing a display, miscellaneous things like that, or additional
Hmm.
parts. Because Legos do wear out over time. I've had to replace stuff over the years, and that gets costly. The base
Sure.
plates alone are not cheap.
So this is a huge project in that aspect as well, organizing behind the scenes, and I'm glad that people are funding this project for you. Let's go back and talk a little bit more about your upbringing in the faith, because I feel like this is an integral part of why you're building these churches and why you want to share them with the world. What was your faith upbringing like? What was your family life like? How did you first get introduced to the Catholic faith?
I grew up in it.
Okay.
My parents, we every Sunday,
Mm.
that's where we were at. We were at mass. If we went to visit family out of town, we went to mass. We had a family cottage in a small town called Port Sanilac. We went to mass. So
Mhm.
that was, unless you were sick, you went to mass. And so that was the entire thing of it for us. As I said, my dad was a lecturer. So you just grew up in that shadow of it and you immersed
Right.
yourself in it.
Yeah.
So that's where things came out from that. Even now, I'm still, oddly enough, I'm still at my home parish I grew up in.
Oh, that's great.
After 7 years still living in Flushing, I eventually came back to Christ the Good Shepherd, where I'm still part of it. I'm a member of their choir.
Mhm.
So I'm still part of everything. And the key thing for me is being able to attend Mass is a very important part of who I am. I very rarely miss. Even when I'm having one of my anxiety days, I still go to Mass because that's where I need to be. And I've
Right.
talked about this on my blog one time about why I attend Mass, even when my mind is not necessarily in the right place to do. But that's
Mhm.
what I learned from. That's who we are.
Right.
And so attending Mass is the critical part of who we should be. And we should always make that a priority. That's a lesson that I've learned. And that's a lesson I try and share through my work a little bit. That's why the
Right.
project has so many people. It's not a reflection of the past, but a prayer for the future.
So your churches are filled, and that's your vision for the future of all churches. I think that's a beautiful thing. And so, with regard to your disability, do you feel like that has shaped your relationship with your faith in any particular way?
Yes, I believe that I've had to rely more on God to navigate life because sometimes my brain doesn't want to cooperate in how I interpret the world. I probably
Mhm.
suffer a lot more anxiety than most people, and even though it's an irrational fear, is what it boils down to. And oftentimes there are things that are just simply that my mind just simply can't process the way that it should, and I rely on God to guide me through it. I may not
Mhm.
be able to see an end road out of the storm, but God can. So I certainly rely and I'm very thankful for his presence in my life to be able to help me to give me wisdom to navigate the storms. Uh,
Mhm.
I think one of the things that people don't fully understand about prayer, it's not about finding magic answers, instant solutions, but sometimes it's a way to unlock things in your own mind so you can see things that you otherwise would not be able to because you're so stressed out in the moment.
Mhm.
And that I've certainly found that out numerous times where there's things going on, and I rely on prayer to guide me more than to allow me to find the answers. So
Right.
yeah, it's a very important part of my faith because you're always facing something. Either you're misinterpreting something or something's going on around you. Whether it's a family member that's having a medical crisis, which in my life has happened numerous times. But yeah, the faith is the core of who I am. Uh, Relying on God is the core of who I am. And I made a decision years ago. I could have been one of the ones that go, God, why did you do this to me? No,
Mhm.
I'm thankful for what I have and what I can offer to everyone around me.
That's a beautiful thing. And do you think your parents were an important part of giving you that mindset toward your disability and toward your faith life? Because it really strikes me as that you don't let it stop you. Like, how did your parents talk to you about your disability?
You know what? I was fortunate in the fact that my dad was a social worker who understood the mental health system. So we were able to get the proper supports needed for me to make it through school.
Mm-hmm.
I've also learned about their faith and dedication. There were many times growing up where something was brewing and we relied on prayer. We would
Mm-hmm.
either pray as a family or we would pray a rosary as a family to help navigate situations that were coming up, and God always provided. Sometimes at the 11th hour, but God had an answer for us. May not have always been what we were expecting, but by the grace of God, solutions came about. When my mom started having her various health issues over the years, we
Mm-hmm.
relied on the faith to guide through us. She relied on the faith to help keep her relatively calm as she was trying to figure out what's going on. The list of health issues is long and
Mm-hmm.
deserving of a blog post in itself. But I learned a
Right.
lot about how to navigate those storms through her eyes because I saw it firsthand. From
Yeah, that's
cancer to
beautiful.
heart issues to whatever current storm we're facing with, I learned about understanding the Holy Spirit and its impact in our lives and how to rely on the Holy Spirit to get us through these moments.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that your parents set a beautiful example for you there. With regard to the church and being a person with a disability in the Catholic Church, what's been your experience with the way that the Catholic Church welcomes people with disabilities? Have you experienced any challenges or frustrations there? Like, how could we do better?
I think there are a couple areas that the church should focus on in the future.
Hmm.
These are issues that I've run into myself as a person with disability. I think the first thing to focus on is our attitude. We
Hmm.
don't fully, we're way too quick to judge someone when they walk in our churches. We don't know their faith story. We don't know where they've been or how they're getting to where they want to go.
Hmm.
Not every disability is easily noticed or seen, and I think we need to take that into consideration as well. I've seen horror stories of families that are treated poorly because their child may have autism and may act in a way that is contrary to what normal people would.
Hmm.
I've certainly had my own challenges with that as well. If you ever see me sitting at mass, you'd see me moving around quite a bit. I'm not
Hmm.
one to sit still. I think the other issue too, though, is as we are getting older, the life expectancy of those with disabilities is a lot better than what it used to be. And even with the normal population too, people are getting older, but we don't have the supports in the church anymore. We don't have friends or family that are in the church, and being able to attend mass in person is extremely important for our spiritual well-being. And
Hmm.
churches do not have a lot of options in that. I think
Okay.
that's one of the biggest, that's out of all the many things that I talk about, the transportation is key. We do not do anything really to support those who don't drive and wish to come to church. Whether it is an elderly person who's this is their only time that they get out of the house, or to someone like me who doesn't drive and the only times I leave is if I'm going on a trike ride or if I'm going to the store or to mass. That's the only times I really get out, or on the
Hmm.
chance I do a project display. But I think the church should at least start to look more into our future. If we want more people to take part, we have to realize that not everyone has the same resources to get to where the activities and the masses are being held. I
Sure.
bet if they were to offer up more ride sharing or make things a little bit easier for us to find rides, because we don't always know who to ask in the church.
Sure.
Even for someone as well known as I am, I don't always know who I could turn to if my main ride can't make it. Or if I
Yeah.
get caught in a position where I'm like semi stranded. There have been a couple times where my main ride I had to leave right away, so he couldn't bring me home, and I had to find someone else. That's happened a couple times, and thankfully, I know enough people in the church that's not that big of a deal. But for someone else,
Yeah.
so when I bring up
Yeah.
these
So
issues,
transportation is a big one. Yeah.
yeah, when I bring up these issues, it's not so much for myself per se, but it's for others who may not have the same resources as I've been able to find. And it has taken me a long time to do.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's one that we should think about, that we should take seriously as a faith community. If we want people in our pews, we need to support them getting there. For not
Yeah,
everybody has access to do the same things that we can. So I think that's a great point to make, and I'm grateful for you pointing that out. We're almost out of time here, but I do want to ask you, what are your future plans? Do you have a big goal for what your future builds might be like, or where you might take this project?
there are a couple parishes that I would love to bring the project out to if someone was willing to provide the transportation needed to make it happen. And
Right.
also, too, I'll go wherever the Lord's willing to send me. If someone can provide the ride, I will go out there. I don't really, where I go isn't so much as important, but there's a couple parishes I really would love to revisit. St.
Hmm.
Anastasia in Troy, Michigan. I've been there a couple of years with the project. I have not had a chance to get back out there. Holy Family Grand Blank with Father Joe Krupp. That looks like it's a beautiful parish. I would love to have a chance to display out there. I think the
Hmm.
people out there would gain a lot from it, and people have suggested that I go there. That's one out
Hmm.
of all the parishes that comes up saying, John, you should go this one. John, you should go that one. If you want me out to a parish, reach out to your leadership. Let them know
Hmm.
what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And something I do want to make a point of is when I'm doing a display, I do not charge for this.
Hmm.
I don't do this for money. I do take
Right.
donations, but that's just to cover costs. That's
Hmm.
not to be, I'm not trying to make an income out of this. I'm doing this out of the love of the faith and to share my talents with others, which we are called to do.
That's beautiful. And you know what I especially love about these projects that you work on, JM, is that it really does underscore that God has a plan for everybody's talents. God has a plan for everything in our world, even Legos. Like it can be a part of God's unique plan for the ways that we're called to share our faith. I think it's so beautiful and so creative. But where can people find you online, or if they want to connect with you, maybe invite you to come to their parish?
You can find me on Substack at Praying
Okay.
at the Bricks. I will I
Praying at the
usually
bricks.
post a newsletter issue about every month or so, sometimes
Okay.
more than once a month, depending on what I've got going on. There's also links to the Building Faith blog where I share a lot of my writings. And sometimes I post over on Catholicism Rocks as well. I've got my weekly Tuesday article. You can also
Okay.
find more about pictures of the project on Lego Church Project through Facebook as
Okay.
well. And that is like where I post all my photos
Okay.
of all 25. If you ever want to see all 25 seasons, how things have changed,
Which we
that's where you
do.
go. That's where you go.
Okay. Okay, so
So
I'll have that linked up in the show notes over at daniellebean.com so everybody can get that checked out and get signed up for your newsletter over at Substack. Jam, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I've enjoyed learning more about how God is using you and your unique talents to reach out to people in the world. And I'm just so grateful that you came on Girlfriends today to share about it. Thank you so much for that.
thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate the chance to share my talents and to share my story with others.
All right, now we're at the point in the show where I like to share some listener feedback. And this week I heard from Quincy. I'm a wife and a mom of two beautiful souls, Timothy, who's 5, and Gianna, who just turned 2. It's been a daily battle to get Timothy ready for school, from waking him up, and then the struggle continues as we drive to school, depending on his mood. I was inspired in one of your recent podcasts to pray the morning offering. Some days he would behave, but most of the time he was complaining about his shoes, something itchy, or just he would have a lot of stories to tell. But then sometimes he would ask us to pray. And then this morning, when I asked if we are ready to pray, he was so happy. He said he got this. And he started praying the morning offering. Oh, praise God. My mama heart was so happy. We really are just planting seeds and then we leave the rest to God. I didn't get a chance to record it, but I did ask him to pray it again on another time. And I want to share that prayer with you. He's just 5. And then Quincy shared with me the recording of sweet little Timothy praying his morning offering. But then in the second part of her email, she said, I just want to say that I'm one of your listeners that has been inspired by your podcast. I first heard about you in the Catholic Women's Conference back in COVID days, and you've been a constant part of my laundry, cooking, and other chores routine. Thank you for all the work that you do. You've inspired me more than what I could share right now. God bless you and your family. Isn't that just the sweetest thing? I want to thank you, Quincy, for sharing that. It really makes me think about the sweetness and the innocence of children. Imagine how overwhelming God's love is for these tiny, precious, beautiful souls. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's a good reminder to us that we need to approach God like little children with that kind of sweetness and simplicity. So, such a beautiful thing. You're doing such a great job in teaching him to pray, getting through some of those everyday normal struggles of getting out the door in the morning, but making prayer a part of that routine is such a precious gift that you are giving to your children. So I want to encourage you about that. And thank you for having me along, doing your laundry and your cooking and the other chores that you're doing every day. That's what it's all about. I consider it such a gift and such a privilege that I'm able to reach people. They're in their hearts of their homes. They're in the midst of their daily activities. So fun that I get to be a part of that. And I want to thank you for inviting me in. And thank you too for listening. Thanks for being part of this week's episode. I'm so grateful for your presence here. I'm looking forward to connecting with you over at Girlfriends After Hours. Let's keep this party going. I'll see you over there. And until next time, I hope you enjoy your day and God bless your week.